Thank you so much for joining us today. This is First Draft's Reporting on Coronavirus webinar series. First Draft's mission is to empower societies with accurate information in critical moments. We help reporters around the world to produce credible coverage. My name is Nell Conway from First Draft's events team. I'm joined today with Laura Garcia, our training and support manager. And today we are discussing how to monitor TikTok. Laura, take it away.
Hopefully by the end of today's webinar, we will have achieved three things together. So number one, to understand the basics of how this app works, to understand the kinds of content and the styles of storytelling that live on TikTok, because they're very different to other platforms, but they're also not that different in other ways. And number three, to learn some basic investigation and monitoring tools for TikTok. Now, I hope this session is going to be way more interactive than some of the other webinars that you've been to. And I'm going to ask that if you haven't already downloaded TikTok on your phone, download it now so you can play along with me. You don't need an account on TikTok to actually interact with the platform. So if anybody's worried about having to link their emails or their personal information, you actually don't have to. If you grab your phone and you just point it in camera mode towards the QR code that's on your screen right now, it'll take you to where you can download the app on your phone. So I would strongly encourage that you do so you can play along with me. It's kind of like riding a bike. I can explain it to you a couple times, but until you get on it yourself and fall a couple times, it won't make any sense. So I'm gonna give us a little bit of theory and introduction in the meantime, give everyone's phone time to do the downloading. And then I'll actually hook up my phone to the screen so you guys can see what I'm doing, and I'll show you how the platform actually interacts. And while we're here, I just wanted to remind everybody, in case you haven't already heard us scream from every single rooftop we can find, that we have two completely free online courses to help us navigate the challenges of coronavirus. One is aimed at reporters, it's called Covering Coronavirus, and the other one is called Too Much Information, and it's aimed at absolutely everybody, members of the public, your friend that's sharing shady or problematic information on your family WhatsApp, or just people that you know. If you're a teacher, this works great with students or as a teaching resource, and you can find both of them free online at covid.firstdraftnews.org. You just have to make an account, log in, choose which one you want to do, or do both, and go from there. Now, so if we talk a little bit about this infodemic that we find ourselves in and why TikTok is important, right? For all of the different types of content that live in there, it isn't without its bit of problematic content, right? I think we've been, and when I say we, I mean journalists. I'm a TV producer by trade, and now I'm doing this kind of work and doing some research into disinfo. I'd kind of write it off and be like, oh, it's just cute. It's just dance challenges. It's just people putting on makeup. But there's actually some really important information that we need to be aware of as journalists and monitor, and also to understand the communities that we're trying to serve. So for example, TikTok was one of the first platforms to ban political ads last year in the run up to the UK general election, and in the run up to the midterms in the US, but still political content thrived because it wasn't outwardly labeled as political. And we've seen that happen a couple of times. End of last year, this girl was doing a makeup tutorial, so curling her eyelashes. And then she started talking about the oppression of certain groups in China, and the video got taken down for a little while, and then it got put back up. And it just kind of proved that just because content isn't outwardly political, isn't outwardly about controversial issues, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be something that we need to keep our eye on as journalists, and also to understand the new storytelling styles that are coming from it, to future-proof our own skills to tell stories and to news gather and to monitor. And we also have to see this in context of all the other information that we're getting through these magical little things, right? It adds to the overall narrative that we get from other platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, news, chats, print screens you get sent, stuff on WhatsApp, messenger groups, and how all of it together can add to bigger narratives by this slow drip of information. So for example, now we're starting to see a lot of memes or a lot of kind of insinuations of Bill Gates and a vaccine around coronavirus that is building up slowly through little drips and drabs this narrative that can be probably really problematic in about 18 months when we actually have a coronavirus vaccine and a lot of people aren't willing to take it. And what does that mean for us and how it's being started right now? That process starts now through all the different drip feeds of information that we get through lots of different platforms. And it's also about something that Claire Wardle, who's the research director at First Draft, has labeled the trumpet of amplification. So how conspiracy theories or problematic content or ideas start in darker parts of the web, make their way up to conspiracy communities, closed messaging apps, eventually social media. And sometimes the point is just for us journalists to see it, to find it, to publish about it, and to give it a bigger platform. And we have to understand that this plays into that dynamic of the trumpet of amplification. Just because it comes from TikTok, it doesn't mean we should treat it in any way differently. Just like we shouldn't treat it in any way differently stuff that we find on Snapchat or on Instagram or on Twitter. So let's talk about some basics, right? And then we'll get to actually show you stuff on my phone of how the app works. So I actually discovered TikTok in my own personal journey because of this particular video. Let me make sure that the volume is down so you guys don't go deaf. And I actually didn't see this video on TikTok. I found it on Instagram and then followed the trace back to Twitter and then followed the trace back to TikTok. And I liked it because it's cute. I'm a big fan of cats. And it just kind of showed one of the biggest powers and the differences of TikTok is that the content and the platform itself is made so that stuff created on TikTok travels through platforms. And that is why we need to be even more aware of stuff that's created and understand this platform. So after I tracked it back through Instagram and then Twitter, then I started to look into TikTok. And it was probably like maybe September last year. So it wasn't that long ago that at least myself, I started seeing it in my timeline or content from TikTok all the time. Just some basic stats. So the actual app itself was launched in 2016. It merged with a US app called Musical.ly in 2018. So the original app was made in China. And then when it merged, it kind of got those two markets together. Last year, it was the second most downloaded app. It is available in over 155 countries and 31 languages. It has more than 800 million users around the world. 57% of those are in China. And 60% of the users from TikTok in the US specifically are aged between 16 and 24, but that is kind of mirrored in a lot of other countries. And it speaks to this new generation of storytelling that we should not only be aware of so we can tell those stories as journalists, but also so we know how to communicate with those future audiences. And it kind of has two layers to it. So TikTok, the app as we know it, is what lives everywhere else in the world. And then Douyin, I think I've just murdered how you say it in Chinese, but it's the Chinese version of TikTok. And they kind of both live side by side and they're the same thing, but they speak to different markets. And TikTok isn't without its problems or its questions or its security concerns. Both the US and the UK government have raised questions about the security of the app because it's owned by a Chinese company and whatever influence the Chinese government can have on that company. And those are completely valid concerns that I'm not going to touch on today, except acknowledging them right now, because that is a separate conversation that we should have. But I just wanted to acknowledge that people do have those kind of questions about the app. But today, let's focus on what kind of content lives on there and how we can monitor and news gather around it. And just to show a little bit more stats, so we've got how it performed against other apps, the rest of the world, around the world for last year. And it comes under Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, WeChat, and Instagram. But if you think about it, a lot of these apps have been around for a really long time. And TikTok is kind of like the new kid on the block if it started in 2016. If we saw it as almost like a heat map in the world, this is the stats as I could find them most recent, kind of like visualized on screen. But again, it's starting to find new markets. For example, I'm originally from Mexico, and people are really starting to get into TikTok. So I'm sure these are going to pop up all over elsewhere in the world. And because it can travel across languages, then that helps as well. Last year, it was downloaded the most in India, then the US, Turkey, Russia, Pakistan. So again, finding new markets where this kind of storytelling and the content can travel, not just across languages, but across continents and across platforms. And if we look at who is on TikTok, you have your your usual suspects. So your big celebrities, Elton John's on TikTok, for example, Jane Fonda is on TikTok, Snoop Dogg is on TikTok. Granted, these are very US, UK centric celebrities, but the same, for example, for Mexican celebrities and from other countries. But the top influencers are people that you and I have probably never heard about. The woman with the most followers is called Charlie D'Amelio, and she does kind of like dance challenges. Then it's a model called Lauren Gray, Zach King, and you can look at these influencers to see what their kind of trends that they set and how everybody else follows suits. Sometimes, and not always, and that's the important thing to keep in mind. TikTok has many, many branches, and I'm going to show you how to navigate all of them. And on the influencer side, it's even, just to speak to the business side of TikTok a little bit, there's even these things called hype houses. So, for example, in the US, the hype house is a collection of young American TikTok influencers who all make money, make a living out of their TikTok videos, and they've decided to rent a house together. And they live together to help each other create content. The opposite across the pond in the UK is called the Bite Squad, but they do exactly the same thing. And these are obviously have different commercial implications and things to think about, but it's important and it speaks to the culture of TikTok as a platform that is kind of taking what Instagram did and then taking it one level up. You also have whole different communities that have found a space on TikTok because of how the stories are told. And I'll give you some examples in a sec. Anything from cosplayers to animators and cartoonists, even to grandparents. There's a couple of accounts, for example, here I'm showing on the screen, Granddad Joe has 1.7 million followers on TikTok, obviously aided by his grandchildren to make these videos, but it just also talks about the different niche communities that live on this platform. And particularly around faith, and now that we're all stuck at home, and we can't gather communally, there are new people finding spaces on TikTok to connect with their communities. Anything from Amish kids to people celebrating Ramadan together, to priests finding ways to communicate with their audiences. There's also a big market and a big growing presence of people answering questions. Lawyers, doctors, psychologists, therapists, answering people's questions in video form, telling those stories and trying to fill a market that that wants that content, right? This stuff, they create more because they're getting rewarded with likes and with shares. That speaks to the fact that people have these questions. And even journalists are getting on there. This lady is called Sophia Smith-Gaylor, and she's one of my favorite journalists on TikTok. She is from the UK. She works at the BBC, and she was on this platform kind of earlier than most of us have started to get on it, to use it as a storytelling format and trying to play around with the different ways that you can tell stories and use narrative on this platform. And one thing to note about the format of TikTok videos is that you can see that here at the bottom, you can see not just TikTok's brand, but also her user handle. And as the videos go along, if they're longer, the place for this handle changes. So you have it sometimes here, sometimes on the top left. And this is to help so that if people download the video and crop it, it still retains that branding. Granted, TikTok does it so we know it came from TikTok, but for a journalist, it's actually quite useful because then we can trace back its origin and figure out where it came from. And the storytelling style is born out of three predecessors, basically. Vine, if anyone can remember Vine, which was a short video sharing platform of GIFs, so like looped images. Instagram Stories, which is vertical, where you can also tell stories frame by frame as you hit your screen and drive the frames forward. And Snapchat, where you can use AR essentially to have filters, change what your face look like, change what your voice sounds like. And all of these three combined together kind of make up how TikTok works now. And we're not going to go in deep into how you create content on TikTok now, but just to give you a sample of how the added layers of creativity are a big part of what sets this app apart to all the other ones. And my colleague Carlotta will speak to that from the data perspective a little bit later on, but this is just a screenshot from my phone. When you point it at something and you've got TikTok open, these are all the different effects that it gives you access to. So you can make the speed faster, you can put filters on, you have color filters, it gives you a timer, you can add a flash, you can trim things, there's different AR effects that you can try, there's pre-made templates, you can upload stuff. And that creativity adds layers of complexity of the kind of things that we can monitor and that we need to understand of this platform. But it's also part of the beauty of it, right? So before we get on the actual app, here's the anatomy of what you're going to see of a TikTok video online on the platform, right? So not if a TikTok's been downloaded and reposted somewhere else, but once you're on the platform. So the main video you see here in the middle, at the top right, you have the little logo for your user, how many likes it's got, how many comments, shares, what sound is using. And this is crucial because there is a way to search through TikTok by the sound that someone has used. And that is a big part of how you can monitor trends and find content on TikTok. TikTok, the app, the moment that you use a coronavirus related word, it immediately displays this little strap at the bottom that takes you to the World Health Organization, the Red Cross, and some official sources of information around COVID. And they started doing that pretty early on. And the types of words that trigger that strap change all the time as they monitor how people create content. Down here at the bottom, you have a space to comment, to add someone, to interact with an emoji. And on the left-hand side, you have, again, the user with the handle, a caption that you can write with hashtags. And if you see, the hashtags are in like a bold color, which means that you can click on them and then search through hashtag. And then the sound displayed again here. So again, sound playing a really big part. And when you hit the share button, these are all of the options that it gives you. It is meant to be shared. So you can copy the link, send it to someone, WhatsApp it, add it to your WhatsApp status, Instagram stories. There's all other different types of options if you scroll down. And also this one, you can save it straight from the app. So I can find something on TikTok that I like, save it to my phone, and then go and share on WhatsApp in my family chat, or then go and post to Facebook, or then go and post to Reddit or any other platform that I want. So it's very easy to do that from the actual app. And that's kind of the intention. And that's why we need to monitor its reach. The other thing that is very unique about TikTok, the app, is that when you open it, and we'll do it in a second, when you open Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, your feed displays the people that you follow. You have to have actively followed accounts or people so that they'll display on your feed. TikTok doesn't. It just natively displays something called the For You page. And the For You page is a really complex algorithm that's trying to decide and learn from what you interact with, what kind of stuff you would like to see more of. And it learns really quickly. And it also means that the likes and people's followers don't necessarily match up. So for example, this is a lady who is doing a PhD, she's an academic. You see this video particularly has got over 15,000 likes, almost 200 comments, 377 shares, but her followers aren't nearly that big, right? And her videos have different views. So the way to measure engagement is a little bit different. And it also means that an account with little to no followers, if it chimes into something that the TikTok For You page algorithm thinks a bunch of other people are going to want to engage and interact with, the views and the likes and the shares and the reach can be really wide, even if that particular account didn't have that many followers to begin with. And that's a really important difference. And it throws up challenges to how we measure impact on this particular app. And the other thing is, beyond how people share stuff, people who create TikTok content are also really aware of the need to spread into other networks and other platforms. So there are an infinite number of compilations of TikTok videos on YouTube. People repost to Instagram. They put together stories on their Facebook feeds. And that is intentional of how people who are influencers are trying to build their brand or tell these stories, use all of these different platforms in connection. And again, it just drives home the point that we need to be aware of where these stories are come from and understand the source, so then we can track it as it goes along. Now, before I hook up my phone into what is a first draft first, does anybody have any burning questions?
Thank you, Laura. As a reminder, you can ask your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of the screen or in the chat box on your right. So our first question, Laura, is how do you indicate you don't like something on TikTok?
That is very interesting. There isn't like an unlike button, you just scroll past it. So it's almost like you're not giving it a thumbs up, you're just ignoring it.
Great, and just feedback that there is no questions at this time because this content was very clear. So I think we should keep moving forward. Laura's gonna go ahead and connect her device so we can see a live demonstration. And please feel free to ask your questions in real time as she's presenting, as they come to mind, and I'll share with her at the appropriate times during the presentation.
If there's anything as well, Nell, that you think needs answering straight away, give me a shout.
Excellent.
And we'll do it. Right, guys, so scary times, you get to see my phone on your screens. This is my TikTok profile. I made it just to try to understand the app and to teach myself how to use it. Again, like riding a bike, unless you're there. Let me show you what the For You page looks like. So when you land on TikTok, and if you open it for the first time, and I hope a bunch of you are doing this with me as we go along, this is what you see. So this video has been automatically selected for me by the platform. It thinks I'm going to like it. And if I swipe up, it'll give me another video that it thinks I'm going to like. And you can just move through it like this. Here's the share button that I was talking about with all the options of where you can send this. And you can email it to people, do a bunch of things. If you look into people's profiles, so let's look at these guys. See how you have the following, the followers, the likes, linked to their Instagram. So again, speaking to that connection between platforms. And if you click on this little arrow next to the Instagram icon, it gives you related accounts. So when we come to talk about monitoring, this little arrow pointing down is an incredibly powerful way of discovering related accounts that you might want to track, right? And there are ways that you can save searches, that you can save songs. So let me show you mine. So on my profile, see where it is to the right of where it says edit profile, and it has a little bookmarking icon. If you click on it, these are my saved videos that I've saved especially for today. I can also save hashtag searches. So again, if you find a hashtag that you want to monitor, you can save it. I can save sounds because you can search by sound, and I can search effects because the effects are sometimes part of trends. So let me show you some examples. I wrote myself a little script to make sure.
Great. And Laura, if you could lower the volume on the phone just a touch. Yeah. When the videos play, great.
Right. Let's try this. So one of the big kinds of content that you're going to find on TikTok is dance challenges. And interrupt me, Nell, if this is really loud. That's about as low as my computer can go.
Great.
So dance challenges, and these are a couple of ambulance operators in the UK taking a break from their very hard coronavirus work right now. And if you click on the song that you're using, so that little spinning record on the lower right-hand side, I can discover other videos that people have made using this exact same song. Now, this seems to be like a little edit of what is a very popular song on TikTok, so there's less videos that I would normally expect to see. But let me show you another one and we can go from there. So there's also people using this kind of frame by frame storytelling to do really funny comedic stuff. Now with comedy, like with everything, and when we approach satire, we have to be careful because within comedy, to get the joke, you have to understand the underlying information, right? So jokes can be a really powerful vehicle for ideas, for disinformation, for political views. This guy is just, he does comedy. He impersonates Trump and Obama like if they were friends and were having sleepovers.
3, 2, 1, ready or not, here we come, Donald.
Well, we are hiding in a tremendous hiding spot, probably one that millions, if not billions of people would not be able to find.
Or, for example, this is the Washington Post's account. They hired a young guy, I think he's in his late 20s, early 30s, and they hired him specifically to figure out how TikTok works, to figure out the storytelling format, and to be ready for whenever what comes next that builds on TikTok comes along. This is him day one during quarantine. Dave Jorgensen's work, ladies and gentlemen. And talking about songs and how songs are used on the platform, let me show you another example of a mixture of one of the more popular songs on the app and really clever video editing. And again, it speaks to this creative nature of TikTok that really adds a layer of complexity of what we can monitor, because it's not just the content, but the song that's being used, the type of shots that marks a trend that maybe speaks to a bigger narrative that we need to be aware of.
I think I'm losing my mind, trying to stay inside the lines. It's like you're running in place.
And for example, going back to a little bit more of I'm not going to call it an old school song because it's a goldie, an oldie but a goodie. And I'm not just talking about the lady in the video, because this is a video by Jane Fonda. I mean the song as well. Hidden within these popular song recreations or trends can be political content or activist content.
And I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the streets, the traffic starts jumping with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5.
So obviously within that song, she's speaking to her activist, environmentalist work, and that can go either way, right? Just because it's based on a song, just because it's creative storytelling, it doesn't mean that there aren't things there that we need to be aware of and potential stories and narratives. So let me show you another one. For example, around the time of Brexit, one second, a particular song from the musical Hamilton started to be used from both sides of the Brexit equation to kind of tell the stories of their communities and whether they were really happy with Brexit and the vote or really unhappy. And when I mean Brexit, sorry, I mean at the beginning of this year when it was finally passed through into law.
What comes next? You've been freed. Do you know how hard it is to lead? You're on your own. Awesome. Wow. Do you have a clue what?
And if I click on the spinning disc, we can see all the other videos that people created with that same song. And I'm not going to randomly select one and play it because a couple of them can be really sweary and have inappropriate content, but they speak to that same trend of using the language of sound, of using the theatrical element of it and the narrative element of it. And some of them get borrowed from other parts of the internet. So for example, a particular sound of Cardi B, the American rapper, talking about coronavirus, got remixed and sampled and ended up on TikTok. And this is the sound that you're going to listen to.
Coronavirus! 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 Coronavirus!
And if you look at some of these hashtags and the content that I'm showing you, they might be about coronavirus, but the hashtags didn't say coronavirus, right? So you don't immediately see that strap that TikTok would put, but if you click on the sound, it is very clearly a song used to create coronavirus related content. And that's why it's important to monitor the songs and the sounds being used, as well as just the hashtags and the words that people are using to describe this kind of content. And in the research that we do at First Draft, we have found 4 main buckets around coronavirus disinformation and misinformation. First is where the virus came from. 2, how it spreads. 3, what are the symptoms and treatments for it? And number 4, how governments have spread. And the same kind of narratives that you find in other platforms exist here. So for example, to speak to where the virus came from, and again, remember, some of these might not be meant to mislead, they might be meant as satire, but taken out of context, they can become disinformation, or they add to that slow drip of information that builds a bigger narrative. Or for example, if we're talking about how it spreads, people trying to share what they think are useful tips. This video has 223,000 views on top of the likes and the different engagements. So, and it's a guy sharing what he thinks are an easy way of making facial shields using a plastic bottle. Now, regardless of where people see this, it might add to different ways. Obviously, we're trying all to keep safe and to protect each other, and it might lead people down to make some decisions that aren't the best, right? In this particular case, maybe just spend some time making a face mask out of plastic, but sometimes it can be worse stuff. And I'm specifically not showing you really problematic content, although it does exist, because I don't want to amplify it. So keep that in mind. The stuff that I'm choosing is pretty vanilla. Symptoms and treatments, for example, we go back to stuff that has been shared in a lot of family WhatsApps, whether lemon and ginger tea is a good remedy for coronavirus. Spoiler alert, it is not. I mean, it's really nice and you can drink it and it's probably going to make you feel better, but it is not a coronavirus remedy and it doesn't cure you from it. Or, hold on a second, there is another one. So this speaks to a different set of messages we were seeing shared on Facebook about how hot air kills coronavirus, and therefore you should grab a hairdryer and blow hot air up your nose or down your throat to try and combat the spread of the virus. Again, not scientifically proven at all, but it just goes to show that this platform emulates all the other stuff. And in terms of governments, you see the same thing, even though it becomes satire, right? Taking a funny approach as to how different governments have reacted and the speed and the seriousness we've just taken it. And again, to remind you, I'm not showing you some of the more problematic stuff. This is just meant to be funny and satire, right? But it's those four main buckets that get replicated. And the same problematic conspiracy theories or conspiracy communities that we see live on other platforms have found also a home on TikTok. So specific, let me find one second. Even asking things in the form of a question rather than as a statement triggers something called the familiarity backfired effect. The more that we hear an idea, the more that we listen to something being repeated and repeated and repeated, it's kind of like the times tables. You end up being more susceptible to believing it, and it becomes part of the narrative. And if anyone just tuning in is from the UK, you'll remember that with the figure that was on the side of the bus in the run-up to Brexit. And that's kind of like a basic primer of how you use this app. And I hope you kind of follow along with me. It takes a little bit getting used to. I'm not gonna lie, my students, I used to teach at a university, my students had to walk me through it a little bit. It takes me about an hour to make a specific TikTok video because I've missed a couple of steps. I didn't get into Snapchat, I got into Insta stories really late. So if you're a content creator, I'd say just fight with it and get to know it enough. Also, so you know how to interact with it. From a monitoring thing, I just realized I didn't show you how to save stuff. So if you do a search just at the bottom where you say discover, for example, type in coronavirus. You see those are the top videos. That displays any users that it can find. TikTok is prioritizing official sources for anything related with coronavirus searches. Then it shows you videos, sounds related or called coronavirus, and then hashtags. And the moment that you find anything that you like, this little bookmark button comes up. Can you see it where it says add to favorites? And you can add it to your favorites and therefore track it and keep an eye and monitor it that way. So I'm going to unhook my phone to the screen while Nell throws me some questions.
Great. So we do have a lot of questions, which is excellent. So I'll just preface by saying we're going to get to as many as we can. Please keep the questions coming, as if we aren't able to address them live on today's call, we are sending a follow-up email after, and we'll be happy to address and provide any additional resources. So let's kick things off. Has the For You homepage catalyst issues around extremist content similar to issues with the YouTube sidebar?
Yeah, and it's something that people are definitely having conversations around. The conversations around the For You page also started around influencers and how, for example, it's easier for you if you interact with content on the platform to see people who are white who are creating content rather than Black content creators, because that's the people that they're suggesting to. So the algorithm works in kind of a very similar way. The difference is you don't notice it because you're not having to follow anybody. It just learns from what you're looking at. And again, it only takes a couple of videos that get shared with you of a specific type that the app starts giving you more of what you like.
Great. So a similar question kind of as we continue what you were just saying. Let me see here. Let's start with who regulates the content on TikTok, and how quickly do they take it down if there's problematic content?
So that is an excellent question. Regulation of any app is a very sticky subject, particularly when it comes to TikTok. There are many questions about the fact that it's owned by a Chinese company. They sometimes take stuff down very quickly, and then they sometimes don't. Sometimes there is evidence that they've taken down content that is critical of the Chinese government, and then sometimes they don't. It's a little bit ad hoc, and it's a little bit challenging for journalists as well, because there isn't a specific process of accountability for the app. They are based in China, they're a commercial enterprise, they're international, And much like it's really hard to get Mark Zuckerberg to provide evidence in Parliament or in Congress, the same applies to TikTok.
Excellent. I'm going to read you two questions. I think they're kind of similar and you can address both of them at the same time. So the first is that I find it difficult to localize. For instance, I get a lot of US content. I guess I just like it more, and that's fine by me, but it would, if it would like to pay more attention to UK, how would that be able to be found? And again, more specifically, if we work in certain countries, is there a way to figure out how to streamline content being created by people in that country just to figure out trends? Because the trends used by people in the US might be different from, say, Hong Kong.
That is an amazing question, and something I forgot to show you on the app. Because it's localized, and it depends on your localization service permissions as well. If you allow TikTok, the app, to know where you are, it'll prioritize content that is from around you and the country that you live in. So number one, make sure you disable access to location services on TikTok. The other thing is that the app itself lets you have multiple accounts in one single app very easily. So what I would do is I would open multiple accounts and actively follow stuff. So for example, I'm setting up a different TikTok account to monitor and actively search for content created in Mexico and in Spanish, because I'm doing the same thing next week to talk about TikTok in Mexico. But I'm forcing the app's algorithm to think, oh, actually, this lady really wants to see this other type of stuff, even though she lives in the UK. And if you are monitoring disinfo, then that might be 2 or 3 different strands of stuff that you want to create accounts that then trigger that kind of that content, that stream of content that gives you that stuff that you're looking for.
Excellent. Do TikTok users tend to spread their content themselves on platforms, or they put it into the compilations or post it to other social networks by other people?
Both. It depends on who you're talking about. And you'll find very different models of people who spread it themselves on purpose, or who find it being spread by other people.
A couple logistics questions about the things you shared in your demonstration. How are the text labels coming onto the video? Those overlay texts, are they superimposed text? How does that happen?
So that is most of the effects that you see on the videos that I showed you, or the tags or the stickers, you can add directly on the app. The creative power of the app is really powerful, and it lets you edit, and it lets you trim, and it lets you change the time when a little sticker shows on and when it disappears, so you can use it for comedic effect. Granted, some people also edit off the app and then upload it straight up the app, but the problem is you need to use one of these songs in the database of TikTok, or it has to be spoken word. So if I record myself talking to TikTok, that's fine. But if I go and find, for example, there's a bunch of music that isn't licensed to be on TikTok, the app, like for example, the Beatles. If I go and make a video that has the Beatles as a soundtrack and then upload it to TikTok, it'll get taken down because of copyright breach.
Excellent. And what is the duet option under sharing?
The duet option splits your screen and lets you react to someone's video. So then you can interact side by side, or if they're doing something crazy, you can do it on the side, or if they're doing a dance challenge. People also use it as a way to add political commentary on TikTok. So for example, they'll have a video of a politician talking and then record themselves reacting to what they're saying. And again, remember that hidden within satire, there is a lot of information, some of which is accurate, some of which can border on disinformation when taken out of context.
Excellent. The questions are flooding in, so I'm going to give you one more, being mindful of the time, and then we can address more at the end. So this question's been asked by a few different people in a variety of ways, but to summarize, are TikToks geotagged in any way, and is it possible to find local posts? Can you narrow it down specifically to where you are?
That is interesting. They are... So again, it's all about how you have your localization services on your phone. And if you're creating content, then it'll easily show it to people around you. As a journalist trying to monitor, that is harder. And not that I know of that there is an easy way, but maybe that is a question that we can ask Carlotta a little bit later on. And I might bring her on next after this, because she needs to head off and do something else later in the afternoon. And you guys and I can finish the last part of it together.
Great. And I lied. I want to ask you one more, because I think this is such a great question. Do you know of, or could recommend, any really good pieces of journalism that the story, or at least the initial idea, came from TikTok?
not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I can 100% recommend how Sophia Gaylor-Smith, who I showed you a video of, is using the platform to start to tell stories. She also just did an Instagram documentary, so it's shot all in vertical and you interact with it, and it's really cool. Mark Foster from CNN is also doing some interesting storytelling stuff. The Washington Post actually has a lot of small self-contained narrative stories that speak to either the stories that they are covering in their paper or that to the history of what legacy media that they are. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of anything that came or the idea came from TikTok, but I'm sure there's people thinking about it and experimenting with the storytelling format.
Excellent. All right, let's move forward with the presentation. Keep those questions coming in and we'll jump back to Q&A at the end.
Excellent. So at this point, I'd like to bring in my colleague Carlotta, who is a data journalist and has been working and researching TikTok and different ways that we can interact with the platform. And then afterwards, I'll show you some basic OSINT, which is open source intelligence of how you can monitor TikTok, find where else TikTok content is being shared on the internet, and give you some quick tips of how to use it, how to do a little bit more digging and research outside of the app. So Carlotta, first of all, I wanted to ask you about what is the difference that you have found in trying to monitor and capture data from TikTok to all the other social platforms that you've worked on before?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Laura, for this question. I think that being able to access platforms' data means, of course, looking behind that anatomy of the videos that you showed before, and to look at them as a whole, looking behind the specific piece of information to analyze trends, patterns, similarities over time, and misinformation tactics in our case at First Draft. So we have recently started to put our attention on exploring and finding methods to access TikTok's data and analyze how misinformation travels on the platform. Luckily, we already have some tools. So developers and researchers are developing scrapers that use TikTok web API to scrape posts and related information. So you can download large quantities of data using different softwares like Python or R. So with these scrapers, you can basically use lists of users, hashtags, and keywords. I think you can even use music ID pages as entry points to query the platforms and obtain your data. So basically you have to request whatever you want, and then you can obtain the data as a JSON or CSV file with a lot of interesting fields. You can get users information, you can get date, timestamp, content. I don't think you can get geographic information at all, but you have engagement metrics, which is really useful, especially for the misinformation area. But even TikTok specific ones like music feeds, single videos information, you have a column with sound, whether the sound is original or not, and a unique code for the sound. So once you have this data, you can perform quantitative and qualitative analysis. You can, for example, gain a view over the most active accounts in the context of a presidential election or a misinformation campaign, or study what the most associated sounds to any topic. For example, I don't know, coronavirus, 5G rumors are. You can put your data into Gephi, which is an open source network tool, and create a network of general hashtags and most active accounts around a certain topic. So there's a very big number of things that you can do, but there's no definitive guide on how to approach this platform, especially from a data perspective. And all of this is still very much exploratory and yet to be discovered, I think. So to use them, you need some very basic computational skills, but they are not hard at all. We can share a couple of links with you afterwards.
And what are particular challenges that you've found, Carlotta, when trying to do this kind of data collecting work and the scraping part of it?
I think, yeah, the main challenge is being able to analyze this data properly and understand what you're seeing. Because behind data, you are downloading people and real stories. And in order to read them properly, you need to know what the context is. And as you showed very well in this webinar, TikTok is a very new and unexplored context, which has very specific frames, very specific formats. And so you can't just export metrics and methodologies from different platforms, from like Twitter or Facebook, that work in a totally different way. So you have to understand how users use the platform. You need to learn the language, the different creative methods, and dive deep into its dynamics before you can even start thinking about numbers. And that's always not easy at all. So another challenge, which I think is really important to highlight, but which is common to all the platforms, is of course the access that you have to the data, and making sure you are accessing to a sample of data that is representative of the group of people that you're addressing to or that you're researching. So it's a threshold that varies a lot based on what you are analyzing. And sometimes a smaller sample is enough to analyze a certain topic, but it's really important to identify what kind of data, what the sample is that you are retrieving, and what is missing, most of all.
And lastly, Carlotta, because I know you've got to head off, are there any insights that you can share with us about that relationship between TikTok and disinformation from the research and the work that you've been doing?
So we have just recently started to look into this, but as I said, this is a very specific platforms, and users typically layer these several unique creative methods, so within the same video. And so when you analyze the data, you have to analyze these different tools, like, for example, as you showed, original sounds, in-video text, dance, lip sync, which makes this information very, very subtle and nuanced to analyze, and much more often coming as misinformation, so as non-intentional misleading content. So what I think is very interesting is that first of all, this is an entertainment platform rather than an information network. And therefore, misinformation often appears leaning toward the parody, the satire that you showed, or pieces of content that are taken out of context and edited, which results into a completely different meaning. So while many users are aware of this highly satirical content, this doesn't mean that the disinformation is less capable of being produced or spread. And so I think that a reflection that is very interesting to do is how much this funny and satire approach is effective in spreading, especially in the most young generation.
Yeah, and I think what you say applies to all social platforms, right? We take to address them like if they were news services, when they're not. They're social networks meant to give us what we like. Thank you so much, Carlotta, for those insights. We're going to move on to the last bit of the webinar, where I'm going to show you some basic, like, monitoring OSINT research techniques. Stick around with us. I'll take another 10 minutes of your time, and then we'll open it back to questions, and I'll address as many of them as you can. If you can stick around, Carla, we'd love to have you if there are any data questions. I've just seen in the chat that someone's asked about whether there's going to be a link list, and there will be. You'll get an email with some links, and we'll make sure to add anything that's related to data there. So give me a second. Let me do some magical tech stuff so I can share my screen with you guys again.
While Laura is going into that, I'll just reiterate again, if you have any last minute questions, please put them into the Q&A and chat box. Also, your feedback is incredibly valuable to us. I am putting our post-webinar survey into the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. We will also be sending the email out so you can respond to the email with questions. We know this is a new platform that come with a lot of new territory, and Laura is always happy to answer any questions or take on a new challenge to find the answers. So Laura, I'll have you take it away, and thank you all for who's joining us. We hope you can stay on for another 20 minutes.
So just to check, can everybody see the rock on your screen?
Yes.
Amazing. So I'm going to use The Rock, Dwayne Johnson's profile to walk you through some basic OSINT. This is all collected in a document that you will also get in the list of links that we're going to email to you guys. Just to also kind of prove that nobody knows this by heart, right? I'm going to be making sure I copy the recipe to show you the kind of stuff that we're looking at. So the first thing to think about when you're trying to find TikTok videos on your desktop is that, unlike Twitter or Instagram, if you want to find a user, you need to put an @ in between tiktok.com/ and that person's handle. And that took me an embarrassing long time to figure out, because if you just keep typing @TheRock, nothing's going to show up. You need that handle in there. The other thing that you can use to find content on TikTok specifically is a Google hack. So, and this works specifically just on Google, the browser. So if you use the command site:/tiktok.com, so you're telling Google search specifically on this particular website domain, and then use Boolean search queries. So for those of us not familiar with Boolean search queries, it's using or in capitals and quotation marks to group the things that you're looking for. So for example, here you're asking it to look for mentions of the name The Rock or the name Dwayne Johnson on TikTok server. So let's try that. If I grab that little piece of code and type it straight into my Google browser, then it's looking specifically inside TikTok for these two phrases. And I can add more. So say, or look for The Rock together. So it's his handle, right? And that way you can start to discover more and more content outside of the app without having to just basically scroll through one thing and the next. Now, we were talking about spread and how it's important to see where else this stuff is spread. You can use another Google hack to see where else it has been shared. So for example, here we are looking for the phrase The Rock or The Rock altogether, because that's how his handle is formatted, with mention of the URL tiktok.com. So if someone's copy pasting a URL from TikTok and sharing elsewhere, but you don't want it to look in TikTok, the website. So that's why it says -site tiktok.com. So if I take that and copy it into another, oh, sorry, there we go. Then it's going to show me places that are in TikTok where links from TikTok were shared. So for example, here we've got Pinterest, Twitter, YouTube, BuzzFeed, a website called Contact Any Celebrity, Facebook, Instagram, and you can see how quickly then this can lead you down a rabbit hole of where a specific type of content is spread. And you can do this for any users. I'm using The Rock as an example, but you can use any handle or any name that you want to look into. If you're looking for specific mentions of other platforms, you can even add them. These are like combos, right? So this is site:, let me get closer so you guys can see, site:, YouTube. So look in YouTube or look on Instagram for phrases, The Rock separated, TikTok, The Rock altogether, because that's his handle, or that it includes in text the URL. So you're asking it to look for that specific bit of text to see if it can find it elsewhere. So again, we grab that and whack it into Google and see what else it can find, right? And you can start to piece it together and start to open up all of this kind of investigation stuff. Just takes a little bit of digging and a little bit of digital share looking to start opening up some of these links to see if you found what you were looking for and start to keep records, right? Archiving your investigations is super, super important. You can also use an old friend called CrowdTangle Link Checker. If you guys haven't heard about it before, it's a free plugin for Google Chrome that lets you, once you log in with your Facebook account, it lets you check where any piece of content has been shared online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. So for example, if we go back to The Rock's feed, I can select any video.
Hey, so you bagged him.
Sorry, that was really loud. I've muted it now. And you can ask CrowdTangle Link Checker, and I've got it already installed here on my browser. Can you guys see it? It's the CT. So if I'm on that specific page and say, hey, CrowdTangle Link Checker, tell me where this has been shared. And this looks, if I'm not mistaken, in the last week of sharing. And sometimes it takes a little while to cook up where it's been shared, but it will help you, again, trace those networks of influence, right? And in the case of The Rock, oh, I know what I've done wrong. We're looking at his account rather than at the specific video. So here, for example, these two accounts on Facebook have been sharing the Rocks account. You can see on Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. And then if anyone works with data, you can also download that data and do a little bit of work with it. If what you want, if you look here at the top on my browser, we are on the accounts page rather than on the individual video, and I should have clocked that earlier. To find the specific URL for the video that you're looking for, and this is crucial if you're going to look into it a little bit deeper, you can't just click on the video, it stays on that main page. You have to come here to the right-hand side where it says copy, and it'll copy the unique code for that specific video, and then you can open up in a different page. And you can see that it gives you here a unique number for that video as well, which can be very useful if you're doing some more advanced stuff to look into it. But at least for the purposes of what I'm trying to do right now, I copy that link, it opens the URL for that specific video, not for the account. And then I can go back to CrowdTangle Link Checker and say, right, who's been sharing this? And you can see that this has changed, the people who've been sharing it, because we're not looking at the account anymore, we're looking at that one specific video. And you can do this with any videos on TikTok. The browser on the web is actually really unfriendly to interact with, but you can do this kind of stuff. The other thing that can be really helpful to verify an account is their profile picture. Because most of us will, if we have different social profiles, use the same photo in different places, and reverse image searching that profile photo can take you to other profiles that this person already has online, or to check if maybe they're using someone else's identity. Now, sometimes on Mac, for example, you can just grab that picture and then you can reverse image search it. But then there's also a way to look at the code behind this web page and see all the elements linked within it so that you can download the photograph. So if you control click on the picture, or right click if you've got a mouse, and you go to inspect, this is going to open a panel that shows you the code behind the website. Now, I am not a data journalist, I am not a coder, I cannot read this kind of stuff the way that Carlotta can, but I can kind of work my way around it enough to find little bits that I'm looking for. So once I've opened up this panel has and contains all the code of the website that you're looking at. And you can do this with any website, by the way. If I click network and then refresh the page, it is going to list every image that is being used to display this website. And you can click on them and scroll through them. So for example, that's mine because I'm logged in onto my TikTok account on desktop. So it lets me do different things. And eventually, if you scroll down, you will find the Rocks profile page and also the profile images of the people commenting on the story. So if that kind of leads you down a different rabbit hole as well, you can. And any of these images, if you click open up in a new tab, you can see the image on its own and then reverse image search it and try and verify that way. Now, I know I'm running through these a little bit quickly, but don't you worry, you'll have that cheat sheet and the recording, and I'm more than happy to answer people's individual questions. I want to show you two last tricks to do with this kind of like basic OSINT technology. So the first one is we're going to extract the video for the best quality possible. So if you end up finding TikTok videos on another platform, my very first recommendation would be track it back to the original account, which is very easy because it'll have that handle under the TikTok branding. So you can get the best quality video. You can also reverse image search these videos the same way that you would any. So you take a screenshot and reverse image search it. And sometimes that's how you can find and verify these videos and see if they've been posted online elsewhere. So the first thing you have to do to verify a video is, or to verify a video, to download the original content, is go to the individual page of a post. So let's start again from the beginning. So this one, I'm gonna copy the individual link for this video and open it up in a new page. And then the next bit is a little bit of wizardry to look through the text, right? And again, I am not a programmer. I don't know how to program, but I can read the code enough and like cheat my way around it to do this kind of stuff that I'm going to show you. The next thing you need to do is come to view source. Depends on the browser that you're on and what type of computer you're on. This process might be a little bit different. It works a little bit different on Chrome and on Firefox. but all web browsers have a way to show you the complete code behind the website that you're seeing. Now, look at this magic. It's like the Matrix, right? Don't worry, you don't need to know how to read it. All you need to know is that you're looking for this particular phrase that says content URL. So I am going to copy that and then come to the page source and do Command F to find, paste that in, and then the URL after content URL, see how it starts here with HTTPS? That here, and it has music DN, that is the link for the source video. And you have to be really careful to find the next set of quotation marks because that's where the link opens. And sometimes it's not immediately clear where it ends. So for example, in this case, it goes all the way here. But if I copy it and then paste that in a new tab, it'll show me the video just on its own.
I'm a savage.
And then I can download it in the best quality possible to start doing some other bits of investigation, whether that is taking a frame and reverse image searching it, or using a little bit of geolocation to see what clues there are in the video to find out where it was taken. The last thing I want to show you is how to find, there's also websites that you can use to download them, but these websites kind of live and die really quickly and sometimes don't get you the best version of the video. Going through the code gets you the source, and it's the most effective way of doing it. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to find the actual date that something was posted. So if you look at this post, it gives you the day. So this was posted on the 22nd of April. This is a new thing that TikTok has been doing for the past couple of weeks. Before it didn't used to display the date. It told you how long before the day you're at that was uploaded, which could be really tricky, especially when you're dealing with content across time zones. But if you want the specific hour at which something was uploaded, we can find it again in the source code in something called Zulu time, which is military time. People in the military use this time code and then use the time converter to find out what that means for whatever part of the world you live in. So if someone, for example, is sharing a TikTok video and saying, this is from yesterday in London, it's outrageous, but the actual upload time is from 3 hours ago, then it can't be from yesterday in London, right? And again, we're gonna use a little trick. You're looking for the phrase upload date all together in this giant piece of code. So I'm gonna do upload date. And you can see next to upload date, it has the year, the month, and then it's broken up. But on the other side of the column of the line, you can see it has the rest of the date, and then the time in Zulu. So 23:48:30:000Z. You take that to an online time converter and figure out what that means from wherever in the world it is that you are, and you can get a precise upload time for that specific video that you're looking at. But remember, you have to look at the URL for the video, not the account, and then go behind the scenes to the source code and then look for these marker labels that can help you figure out some more of this information. And there's way more tricks that you can do with OSINT, but I have a feeling I'd rather answer a bunch of your questions and take it from there. I'm very happy, like Nell said, to talk TikTok with anybody whenever you want, whether it's the creation of or the narrative or the storytelling that takes place in it. So Nell, throw me some questions because I can see there's many.
Yeah, so let's start with what we were just talking about, and then we'll circle back to some of the earlier questions. So can that search that you were doing before when you were searching the rocks username, can that also be done with hashtags?
That is an interesting one. Yes, and it involves a little bit more scraping. If what you're trying to look for is a trend of how a hashtag is used, and that is more of what Carlotta was talking about. The code that I was showing you is just specifically for that one post. But there are ways, for example, to scrape, if you look at the code behind of all of the comments on a specific TikTok video, all of the user profiles, and then use that to start visualizing networks. But the one that I was showing you is just specifically for that one video.
And what if you've uploaded video to TikTok, so not native? Would that throw off the results of timestamp in the code?
Well, I think we need to state the difference. So this is the time when it was uploaded to TikTok rather than the time when the video was generated. So those two might not necessarily be the same thing, but that's a good thing to point out. This is the time when it was uploaded to TikTok.
And will CrowdTangle be able to tell if a TikTok video has been shared on Instagram stories, or does it only track its posts?
As far as I know, it only tracks posts. Carlotta, do you know if CrowdTangle Link Checker tracks whether something's been shared into stories?
No, I don't think it doesn't track Instagram stories. It's everything that is online, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then coming back to kind of the user function, this question was asked in a couple different ways, but can you do personal messaging in TikTok so that you can contact users to use as sources in stories?
Yeah, it has a messaging function, but you have to follow each other. And the last version that I checked on my phone yesterday, and they do change the app all the time, in order to personally message people, you have to link either an email or a phone number to your account. But the other functionalities you can do just with an account, like as normal.
Great. And is there any music rights and all the songs and music? How is that being addressed? Are artists giving the rights to these songs to be used?
That is a really good question that I haven't actually looked into, but I will take it as homework. I know that the sounds that you can use exist as a bank of sounds on TikTok, and that's kind of about as limited as you are. But exactly where those rights come from, I'd actually never thought about it, and I will look into it and I'll give you guys an answer.
Great. Is there a fear TikTok will be neglected until the problem escalates too far, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube?
I would say that's the fear with any new social platform, particularly when those of us in newsrooms decide that a platform is not for us. And we go, oh no, I'm too old for that. Oh, that's just for kids. And it might be, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep an eye on it or learn how it works, because whatever comes after TikTok is going to build on TikTok, just like TikTok builds on Snapchat and just like it builds on Instagram stories. And if we miss a step, it's harder to understand that narrative format. And like Carlotta was saying, it's not just about the technical functionality of the app, it's the cultural and the community of how people use it. Twitter is not just about tweeting, it's about the hashtags that people use and the funny things and the trends and the memes. Facebook is the same, Instagram is the same, and understanding that language and the culture that develops around a platform is equally as important as understanding how it works technically, particularly for those of us who want to tell people stories, right? At the end, like Carlotta mentioned, people are at the heart of the work that we do as journalists.
Excellent. Then I have two more questions before we wrap this up from a journalist user perspective. I think you touched on this in the beginning very briefly. And like you said, it might be a whole nother conversation, but as journalists, how concerned should we be about the security of our own data and information on the platform?
I'd say it depends on the kind of work that you do and how sensitive the research that you're doing on that platform is as well. And this answer will be very different to everybody, just like we all make decisions of whether we post, for example, pictures of our house or of our children, or even use running apps that track where we run that might give people some information about where we live. You kind of have to gauge that same decision for yourself on this particular app. The security concerns of the app being owned by a Chinese company are there, and these conversations are being had by people who are way more qualified to answer that question than I am. But I do think it's important to realize that there are different levels of engaging with the app that each come with it with a new commitment of the information that you're giving it. But there are ways to interact with the app without having to give it any of that. So if you use the kind of, for example, Google operators that I just showed you, you can find content on TikTok without having an app that is tied to your phone, right? Or for example, I have two phones, one that is kind of broken that I use to view apps and research content that is a little bit more problematic, and then the phone that I use for my daily life, because I want to keep those two things separate, and because I know that some apps learn from your behavior, and I want to make sure those things are kept apart and side by side.
Great. And you've given us a lot of examples of accounts today, but for the last question, do you have any recommendations for journalists of specific accounts that they should be following that might be interesting from a journalism perspective?
That segues perfectly into my things of resources that I'm going to share with you guys. So give me a second. Let me get my slides up again. Before I do this, because I'm fighting with technology a bit, is there anything else that you want to add, Carlotta, that you think we've missed or that it's important to think about?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly repeat the tools that we mentioned before, because I saw a couple of people who missed the names. So everything that Laura mentioned about monitoring and tools that she showed are incredibly useful to monitor the content on TikTok, and you can manually collect data based on that. If you want to collect data more collectively and in a very comprehensive way, you need to use some computational methods, which are not hard at all to learn, but you need to use computational languages like Python, for example, or R, or any web scraping tools that you are most familiar with. But you need that little bit of level of coding skills to access those data. But we will send you a couple of links or tutorials to know how to do it.
Yeah, and we have a great webinar that we've done previously in this series on that topic. All of our previously recorded webinars can be found on our website, firstdraftnews.org. Right on the homepage, you can access all upcoming and past webinars for your viewing pleasure. And Laura.
Right, guys. So let's finish this off with some resources. Like Mel and Carlotta said, we will 100% send these over email as well, but just to highlight what you're getting and what's coming up. So there's a guy called Francesco Saffarano. He is the senior social media editor at The Telegraph, which is a broadsheet newspaper in the UK. And he has a running list of journalists and media organizations on TikTok. And this is a live Google spreadsheet that he updates himself and takes people input to try and keep an account of the people in our industry who are starting to experiment with storytelling on TikTok. So I would say 100% this list is an excellent place to start to see how different accounts are using this kind of storytelling format. Anything from Cosmopolitan to English Pen to CNN and esports. The other people that I wanted to point you towards are, and I think someone mentioned Taylor Lorenz in the chat. She is an amazing reporter who works at the New York Times and has her pulse on internet culture in a perfect way. And keeping up with her feed and her work is a really good way to understand the culture around TikTok and new emerging platforms. And the other one is, I'm not sure if she eventually logged on to the webinar, but I saw that she registered, is a lady called Jane Litvinenko who works for BuzzFeed and does incredible research around disinformation across all platforms. And those are just two recommendations of people's work that I can port towards that is a good benchmark of how these things are getting discussed in the industry. The other thing is to remind you guys that we have a portal for reporters. If you go to firstdraftnews.com/coronavirus, you'll find a collection of tools, informations, how the platforms are responding, a list of our upcoming webinars, different readings from around the world, from around the web. You can subscribe to our newsletter. And again, to remind you that we have 2 free online courses, one tailored for journalists and one tailored for journalists, family, friends, and everybody else to help us all navigate through the infodemic. And you can go and create a free account at covid.firstdraftnews.org. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. I hope all these questions have been useful. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter, or I did put up my TikTok, so if anyone's going to start creating and experimenting and you want to connect through there, happy to answer all of your questions, and so we can figure this all out together. Nell, I forget the rest of the end speech for these webinars.
You've got it. Thank you all so much.
My name is Nell Conway from First Draft's events team. A huge thank you to Laura Garcia and Carlotta Dota for today's excellent content. For additional resources and upcoming webinars, please visit firstdraftnews.org/coronavirus.